You probably don't think often whether someone will go to heaven or not, but there's one American music icon who doesn't think he'll make it to heaven. Jerry Lee Lewis is a rock and roll legend and now in his 80s remains just as popular. But in addition to his legendary music career, he's also had several marriages, run-ins with the IRS, and a rivalry with a fellow rock star. And these are some of the reasons why Jerry Lee Lewis isn't sure about his next destination in the next life. Jerry's early life. Today, the town of Ferriday, Louisiana boasts a small population of 3,500 people. Yet this charming small town claims to have produced more famous Americans per square mile compared to any other town. Jerry Lee Lewis was born September 29, 1935 in Ferriday. He grew up in a poor family who, nevertheless, were willing to support him in his endeavors. At a young age, he developed a keen interest in playing the piano. He began studying with his two cousins, Mickey Gilley, who became a popular country music performer, and Jimmy Swaggart, who became a famous televangelist. His parents mortgaged their farm so they could buy young Jerry a piano. He began playing each day and singing. He had a range of musical influences, from country music to the juke joints that were popular among Black Americans in the South. He gave his first live performance in 1949 when he was 14. He performed country songs at a local car dealership. He must have impressed the customers because since then he's hardly taken a break from performing. He began composing his own songs and continued performing at local clubs, bars, and wherever he could. He couldn't have started his music career at a better time. It was the 1950s, and a new genre of American music was being created. Rock and roll was a new iteration in the long line of rebellious American music. In fact, Jerry got thrown out of his religious school after singing a song called "My God Is Real," which was considered blasphemous. Jerry's music career. When he reached his 20s, Jerry became adamant about getting his music recorded. He showed up at the Sun Records office and refused to leave until producer Sam Phillips heard him perform. Sam relented and gave Jerry a chance. His first release in 1956 was a complete failure. The song was called Crazy Arms. While it's a great song, it couldn't compete with Heartbreak Hotel, released by Elvis the same year. Luckily, his second record release, Whole Lotta Shakin' Goin' On, became a huge hit. It's still considered one of the most popular rock and roll songs ever recorded. While the original version was recorded by Big Maybelline, the Jerry Lee Lewis rendition remains the most popular. But what really brought him to international stardom was his song Great Balls of Fire. Even if you aren't familiar with his music, you've likely heard that song many times. But it wasn't just the music that captivated audiences. It was also Jerry's outrageous lyrics. His music was considered controversial for its time. Many established artists and record labels disdained his music. Many stations banned it because they felt it was vulgar. Yet the more he was banned, the greater his appeal became for youngsters. Of course, Jerry never felt his music was vulgar or even risque. He soon became enamored of his success and felt no one could perform like he could. He managed to surpass rock and roll legends like Chuck Berry and even had a rivalry with the king of rock and roll, Elvis Presley. He was one of the early pioneers of the rockabilly style. He released over 40 albums in 7 decades. Now in his 80s, he still performs on occasion. His music is considered a quintessential aspect of American pop culture. This video is brought to you by Established Titles. Have you ever been interested in being a lord or a lady? With Established Titles, now you can become one. For real. You could officially change your name to Lord or Lady and get it on your credit card, plane tickets, etc. You can even get it on your dating profiles. You can purchase title packs that give you at least 1 square foot of dedicated land on a private estate in Edelston, Scotland. With the purchase, you'll receive an official certificate with a crest. Your certificate features a unique plot number with which you can see the exact location of your land. Established Titles told me that the first 200 people purchasing a title pack using my link will effectively be next to my plot within a few minutes of walking. Depending on how many of you want to become a lord or a lady, we can build our little facts first kingdom. They plant a tree with every order and work with global charities, One Tree Planted and Trees for the Future, to support global reforestation efforts. It makes an amazing last-minute gift. Established Titles is actually running an early Black Friday sale, plus if you use the code FV10, you get an additional 10% off. Go to establishedtitles.com/FV10 to get your gifts now and help support the channel. Jerry's marriages and children. Many of the controversies and troubles in Jerry's life concerned his several marriages and his family life. He's been married 7 times. He married Judith Brown in 2012 when he was 76 years old. His first marriage was when he was 16. He married Dorothy Barton, the daughter of a local preacher, and the marriage lasted just under 2 years. His second marriage was in September 1953 to Jane Mitchum. This marriage wasn't considered valid as it occurred before he finalized the divorce from his first wife. He had 2 children with Jane before getting divorced in 1957 after 4 years of marriage. But his most controversial marriage was his third one. He was 22 and married his cousin Myra, who was 13 years old. He would lie and tell the public she was 15, which greatly tarnished his public image. He first married her in December 1957, but this wasn't considered valid as his divorce from Jane had not been finalized. They remarried in June of 1958 and remained so for 12 years. With Myra, he had 2 children as well. He barely spent time with Myra as he was either touring or recording albums. Nevertheless, Myra complained she was subject to physical and mental abuse and filed for divorce in 1970. The marriage to Myra remains one of his most controversial aspects, yet this didn't hinder his popularity or his career. His fourth marriage was to Jane Pate, with whom he had 1 child. Jane died from drowning in a swimming pool shortly before their divorce proceedings could be finalized. Their marriage lasted for close to 11 years. His fifth marriage was to Shawn Stevens. That lasted only 77 days. Her cause of death was a methadone overdose. However, it's been suggested that she endured abuse from Jerry, which led to her death. His sixth marriage was to Carrie McCarver, which lasted for 21 years. He had his son, Jerry Lee Lewis III, with her. He married Judith Brown in 2012, 7 years after his marriage with Carrie McCarver ended. Jerry Lee Lewis has also had troubles with his children. Sadly, 2 of them have passed away. His 3-year-old son, Steve Allen Lewis, died from drowning in a swimming pool. Later, his 19-year-old son, Jerry Lee Lewis Jr., died in a car accident in Nesbitt, Mississippi. He's also had troubles with some of his other children. He sued his daughter Phoebe, alleging she had deposited his earnings into a bank account that only she had access to. A judge eventually dismissed the case, stating it had gone past the statute of limitations. Jerry's other troubles. Much of Jerry's troubles have come from his relationship with his wives and children. But he's also had a few troubles outside this. Much of the grief he's experienced in his life made him turn to drugs. He had to go to rehab to kick his addiction to marijuana, cocaine, and alcohol. He also had a run-in with the IRS. They claimed Jerry owed millions of dollars in unpaid taxes. Many of his possessions have even been confiscated by the IRS. Guilty of tax evasion in 1984, he still owed debts to the IRS. He had to pay $3 million, of which $2 million was tax debts. A mention should be made of Jerry's rivalry with Elvis. Their rivalry went back to the 50s when Elvis would often outsell him. Jerry once showed up to Graceland, the famous mansion where Elvis lived. Jerry claimed Elvis wanted to meet him. When he showed up, he was drunk and happened to have a gun in his car, which he'd been given earlier at a nightclub. He broke through the Graceland gates. Elvis saw this through the CCTV cameras and had his staff call the police. Jerry was charged with public drunkenness and carrying a pistol. It was one of the most controversial episodes of his life. Now it's time to hear from you. What do you think about Jerry Lee Lewis? Let us know in the comments section below.